Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is our first lecture from Cell Structure and Organization, which is the topic of O-Level Biology 5090. So in this video lecture, we will be simply defining the cell. Always remember that in your biology paper, for example paper 2, you can get the definition of the cell and you can be asked to define the cell for 1 mark. If you're asked to define the cell for 1 mark, you will always state these three magical words that cell is the unit of life, right? We can write that cell is the basic unit of life. And what is actually meant by this statement? Unit means the smallest component, right? So if I'm talking about life, what is the smallest component of the life, or what is the unit of life? That is the cell. For example, I'm an example of life, right? And my smallest component is the cell. Every living organism is made up of cell, and the smallest component of every living organism is the cell. This is what you need to know. And this means that life begins at cell, life starts at cell. Life cannot be smaller than the cell because life begins at cell, and cell is itself the smallest component of life. If you want to write the definition of cell for more than 1 mark, you can also mention that cell contains a nucleus, cytoplasm, and cell surface membrane. This is true for majority of the cells. So guys, let me tell you what is the nucleus, cytoplasm, and the cell surface membrane. In front of you, animal cell is drawn. We can see animal cell over here, right? This is the animal cell. And you can see that it has a boundary, right? And this boundary is known as the cell surface membrane. As you all know, that cell surface membrane is a partially permeable membrane which controls what enters the cell and what exits the cell, right? So all cells have cell surface membrane and all cells have a cytoplasm. Now, what is a cytoplasm? Cytoplasm is a jelly-like fluid which is inside the cell surface membrane. To be more precise, we can say that cytoplasm is a jelly-like fluid which is between the cell surface membrane and this central structure called the nucleus. What is nucleus? Nucleus is the control center of the cell. Nucleus controls all the activities of the cell. So you need to know that most of the cells, they contain nucleus, cytoplasm, and cell surface membrane. But do remember that some cells lack nucleus. However, they do contain cytoplasm and cell surface membrane. So always remember that if a cell is living, it will always contain cytoplasm and cell surface membrane. It may or may not contain the nucleus, but most cells contain the nucleus. If a cell is dead, you won't see cytoplasm and cell surface membrane in that cell. All right. What else can we write in the definition of the cell? Cells are specialized to do a specific task or function. For example, red blood cell is specialized to transport oxygen. So guys, you need to know that cells are mostly specialized. What is meant by specialization? Cells acquire or adapt to a particular structure. They change their structure so that the structure is according to the function. The change in structure makes them suitable to carry out the function. For example, if we talk about the red blood cell transports oxygen. Let me show you the red blood cell. So this is the red blood cell. As we can see that red blood cell does not have a nucleus. So this thing in the center is not the nucleus, right? Red blood cell lacks nucleus, and red blood cell also lacks other organelles or other structures which gives space for the hemoglobin. Red blood cell has hemoglobin, right? And because of the hemoglobin, red blood cell is able to transport oxygen. So cells are usually specialized, which means that normally cells do not contain hemoglobin, but red blood cell contains hemoglobin. So that is a part of specialization. Red blood cell does not have a nucleus to have more space for hemoglobin. So red blood cell has changed its structure in such a way that it can transport oxygen efficiently. So cells are usually specialized. There are a lot of specialized cells in the human body, like the neurons, which are the cells of the brain that conduct electrical impulses. We have muscle cells that contract. So cells are mostly specialized so that they can perform a specific task. Lastly, we can also mention that cells arise by the division of pre-existing living cells. Now, this point is very, very important. You need to understand this. You cannot make cells in the laboratory using molecules. If you want to make new cells, you need to have pre-existing cells or old cells, and these cells should be living. So, if I'm living organism, if I'm a living organism, I can make new cells. Why? That's because I have pre-existing living cells. If we look at a dead body cannot make new cells because although it has pre-existing cells, but those cells are dead, right? So we can make new cells only from the pre-existing living cells, and that too by a process called cell division, right? And how do we define cell division? Cell division is when we have a parent cell, right? And this parent cell splits into two daughter cells. So from one cell we get two daughter cells. Now these daughter cells can further divide and split into four, and then four cells can split into eight, and so on. This is how new cells are made from the old cells. Always remember this point, that whenever a cell divides, the parent cell vanishes and the new cells are the two daughter cells. It's just like if you have a cake and you cut it into two pieces, the original cake will not be left anymore. You will just have the two pieces. All right, guys. So we are done with the definition of the cell. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Allah Hafiz, everyone.